Luxury without limitations, style without compromise, a life well lived. Welcome to Selling the Luxe Life, the only radio show that seeks out and highlights the deeply authentic and genuinely meaningful, unique luxury lifestyle experiences in Orange County, bringing new and emerging premier products and services to discerning clients and connecting the affluent customer to the finer things in life.
Good morning, everybody. Are we on? Paul?
We're on.
Okay,
we're on. New show. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Inaugural show for Selling the Luxe Life. And we are here in the studios of OC Talk Radio once again. Paul Roberts on the board.
As
Hi, Paul.
always,
Okay.
manning the board, looking forward to you. You brought in the man, the myth. You have said for so many years you know this guy. I said, you don't know this guy. You really don't. You're not really connected to important people like this.
You know what? I have the privilege and honor to actually have a good friend of mine and somebody that I respect very much, and actually respected him from afar before I even met him. And then when I met him, I even respected him more. And don't see him enough, but I had to put on a friggin' show, build a show so I can actually get him to sit in front of me for half an hour. Okay, so that's the trick, people. You want to meet people, have a radio show. But no, we really are happy to roll out this new radio show produced by Golden State Media, Selling the Luxe Live, because we really feel that there is an interest about how we all talk about luxury living. We all talk about what represents luxury living. Is it food and beverage? Is it time spent with your family? Is it clothing? Is it whatever? And I cannot think of a better person to kick this off with, and I'm so glad you said yes. Thank you, Shaheen, for saying yes.
Absolutely.
My guest, for those who are only listening to us and cannot see and don't recognize this gentleman, which you should, what's wrong with you? My very good friend Shaheen Sadeghi, President and CEO of the Lab Holdings. He's right down the street here in Costa Mesa, right on Bristol. And just a little background, I lived vicariously through their accomplishments in the 90s when I was going to design school, because I saw what he was doing with the lab and the camp, and I was thinking, oh my God, somebody finally gets it. And then met him when they were trying to do a project in San Clemente, and I really am thrilled to have you here, and I cannot think of anybody better to guide us through this, because I think these days we are a very confused society on many levels, including the fact that of what we value. And when we talk about luxury, the bottom line is you're talking about value. Right, you're talking about things that you value personally, things that you value maybe as a group, things that you as you have connection with people, and what you as a unit value, family, all this stuff. So, I know you did not start off necessarily in real estate development. You had a life before the lab. So for people who don't know Shaheen, would you give us a little background, just really quickly? I know you have a pretty impressive background prior to getting into real estate, and really then impressing the heck out of everybody.
Well, thank you. All right, and there's a lot of love at 9:30 in the morning, so thank you. Yeah,
always, my friend.
I grew up in Michigan, went to school at Pratt in Brooklyn when Brooklyn wasn't cool in the 70s, and I studied design, and I thought I wanted to be a couturier, so I studied to be a couturier and learn how to make $10,000 dresses, and I soon realized that it was something that I sort of had aspiration for, but I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. But I think through that tunnel, I got involved into the action sports industry fairly early on. Ended up moving to California after living in New York for a while, and got involved with a company called Janssen Sportswear.
Mm-hmm.
We were the number one in golf and tennis and swim, of course, and racquetball was kind of big thing. And by the way, I'm not good at any of those sports, but so we became.
But you look good at it.
But I did. We were the largest. This is pre Ralph Lauren and Nike and so forth.
Oh yeah.
So, and I think through that experience, I had always a little bit of a Marco Polo inside of me, just based on my background. And, a couple of weeks into the job, I was on a Pan Am flight to Japan. And landed in Japan and absolutely fell in love with the culture and the food and the people. And, then next thing I knew, I had an office in Hong Kong in the Tsimshatsui area for about 10 years. So I would gallivant back and forth. This is pre-internet, so we had to travel. And so my career started in the action sports industry, and then some years after that, about a decade after that, I ended up with Gotcha Sportswear here in Orange County.
Another big name,
That's what brought me down here to Laguna. And that was amazing times, amazing product, and really very cool people that I worked with. Michael Thompson and Joel Cooper, and I still have a lot of love for those guys. And we had a blast. I think we went about from 15 million to about 150 million in 4 years. So it was a fast ride. And then I had the opportunity to move to Quicksilver, which was a competitive company at the time, but I was really interested in running a public company. VF that I spent 10 years with was a public company, so I learned a lot, and I had some aspirations about operating one. And so I was at Quicksilver as president, and then I think it was through that process and what happened during the early 90s with Orange County, the economy, and globally, and retail, all of that sort of triggered me to go into the, I suppose you call it commercial real estate, but we didn't think
well,
that.
I don't think you think of it that way, do you?
I really don't. I mean, I think we just, we got into it because of our passion for retail and really recognizing that there was groups of people out there that were so different than the people when I grew up, when I was younger. And I think we just recognized sort of this cultural shift that was going on. And, and I kept, as a public company, I kept looking out there, waiting for some big brand or a big retailer to make the shift, and it just didn't happen. So at some point, I think I just had enough inside of me to sort of come off the corporate ship and try this thing on my own.
Well, so it almost sounds like you were sitting in a sort of in a unique vantage point, being at Quicksilver and Gotcha, and having sort of a closer connection to that cultural shift that you're talking about, and then the actual housing or the vehicle through which this is basically going out to the people was not catching up. And so there was a lag in how these things were being presented, but you were in the sort of, if you will, lifestyle and cultural component of it on the apparel side. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I think, I think sort of in a nutshell that's definitely what ended up happening. But, there was several different parallels going on. I mean, I think one of the situations that most people really may not remember is most of the big department stores here on the West Coast that we were doing business with went out of business. Buffum's went out of business, Broadway went out of business, Bullocks, I Magnum. I mean, these were pretty iconic brands, and they were around for years. And Macy's West filed Chapter 11. This is when the Finkelstein family used to run it, and most people don't remember that. And here is when Macy's was there before we had railroads, So I knew that there was something going on. And by the way, that's just in California. I think if you looked across the country, the same sort of storm went through the rest of it.
Sure.
And I think much of the market would look at it in terms of, retail is bad or the economy is bad. We looked at it as a cultural shift. I think we recognize that this next generation of, I don't want to call them customers, but next generation of culture that was coming through, they were thinking different, they were buying different. I read an article, and I've said this over the years, it was in the Wall Street Journal about Mall of America pulling the benches off of their common areas because they didn't want kids hanging out.
Yeah. And
when I read that article, I thought, oh man, we as an industry, we sold $3-4 billion worth of product to this customer, and this, we looked at them. It's very smart, very savvy. They're into the environment. They're into politics.
The kids.
And they looked at him as cotton candy, eating, bubblegum chewing, teeny bops.
Taking up space.
Yeah, just taking up space, and we don't want you in the mall. So I think that article just triggered something inside me in terms of the dichotomy that was going on culturally. And so, and you know, by the way, I get it. You know, I grew up in Michigan. The malls were replaced the downtowns, and that's kind of where you went on a date and hang out with your buddies. And
Yep.
eventually, the movie theaters moved in, so that was, and there were heated boxes or air conditioned boxes in the summertime. So that was the place of gathering. But I just knew that this next generation just wasn't interested in marble and fountains and homogenized stores.
So what made you see this opportunity? You got an interest to basically build a better mousetrap, if you will, a different approach. I think that I remember you doing a presentation in San Clemente, and you came in and did a presentation for the Historical Society, and I'm not going to go down the path of that project at all. But one thing that resonated with me, and I remember looking around the room. And I've shared this with you before. I looked around the room. Shaheen comes in, and he's got this presentation, and I think it was a white bounded presentation, and you got all these people at the Historical Society, and we're all just fighting, wrapping ourselves with chains around buildings, trying to make sure that they don't go down, and basically fighting the good fight for the last 20, 30 years. And Shaheen comes in with this white book, and he sits, and we're talking, and everything that he's talking about is love and emotion and investing in emotion and all this stuff. And I'm looking around and I'm eating it up. It's like, okay, give me a bigger spoon because I can't shovel this stuff down my throat fast enough. And I'm looking around the room, and there's blank stares around the room. And I love those people a lot, but it was really funny because I think you really put your soul in what you do, and you've done so from day one. And, one of the questions that I sent you was, what is your passion? What drives you? I think everybody who experiences these places that you have put together, these gathering spaces, yes, there's a F&B component to it. Yes, there's a retail component to it, but there's a lot of soul in it. And it's not a repeat either, because you've touched different places. In Anaheim, the packing house, I think off down here, even the camp and the lab have a different flavor. And they're right across the street from one another. And you gravitate people that you draw to you, that basically, the Chris's of the world and stuff that are involved in this. Leadership and inspiration is amazing, man. I mean, I'm sitting here across from you, and you say it's a lot of love before 10 o'clock in the morning. But you know what? It's very well deserved. And I remember very clearly going to design school in '94 when I graduated, and I remember you guys doing this because am I correct? It's about '94, like mid '90s.
We opened in '93.
'93, '94, yeah, and that was the lab.
Correct.
Right now. Here I am. I'm looking at and that armpit of Bristol. I mean, at the time was literally an armpit of Bristol, and you are basically the shiny object that's basically going in there, and you're going into adaptively reusing the buildings, right? I mean, wasn't it an adaptive reuse?
Correct.
Yeah. No, so the adaptive reuse, which everybody basically now champions, about, oh my God, we're going to take these buildings in downtown LA and turn them into hotels and stuff like that. In '93, you opened adaptive reuse. And tell people who don't know, Shaheen, what was that? What were those buildings before?
Well, the buildings were, actually the business was called Exotic Materials, and they made military night goggles for the Gulf War I. This is when Bush was our president, and they decided to move their facilities to a different facility, so we had the opportunity to purchase. What
made you pick that area?
Well, I think again, most of these things are not singular answers, but we wanted to be at a location that people could access to, and we also wanted something that had some texture. We weren't looking to build another beige building with a red tile roof. I think we would have gotten lost. And so when the opportunity in Bristol, and I always looked at South Bristol as a very kind of a precious area, because many people, I should say, that come through Costa Mesa, come off the 405, and you can go take a left and go to South Coast Plaza, which is the nicest mall in the country, and you took a right, and it was like Blight.
Mm-hmm. And on the way to Newport.
On the way to their home, or Newport, So I never really understood the topography there, but. So I think when this building, it was just it was the perfect situation, because the idea of taking a night goggle factory that built stuff for the war and turning it into this sort of peace environment, and also the opportunity to recycle, and recycling wasn't really fashionable back then. I mean, green wasn't even a vocabulary, but the idea of repurposing seemed very exciting to us, because it. For us, I've said this before, I think we have this terrible habit of wiping our history in this country. And although we don't have deep history here in Orange County, this building was in the 60s. So, it wasn't
Has a history.
Florence,
Yeah. Right.
but it was our history. And so, we really felt that this adaptive reuse would would preserve some of the story as opposed to just, wiping it out and putting something neutral in there. So.
And was the mix that you have today, was that something that was sort of a thought through idea from the beginning? Was it organically something that came together? How did you end up with the very nice mixture between apparel, or you've got a used clothing location in there, you got food and beverage, you got cafes. I mean, Gypsy Den is there. How did you go into it from day one thinking or knowing that this is what you wanted clearly, or did it just organically happen?
I had just been working with the largest apparel manufacturing on the planet, which was VF.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked for the largest surf brand in the world, the largest two surf brands in the world.
Gotcha and Quicksilver. Yeah.
Gotcha and Quicksilver. And one of the things that I recognize is that the most exciting part of being involved in these organizations was building the brand and growing the community. And, of course, with surfing, the community is global. It's much more global today because of the internet, but back then, there was a sense of communication, even though we didn't have internet. You just knew people in South Africa surfed and people in Australia
It's a
surfed.
tight community.
Yeah, it was a very tight community. People in Newquay, England surfed. Like wherever there was surf, these people connected somehow. So it was a global village in a sense. And I was always intrigued by how, there was this search for a wave, And I think through that lens, I recognize that a lot of our products, goods and services in this country, the exciting stuff was coming from smaller businesses. And, I don't want to bore you with the philosophy, but,
Bore me.
Okay. So, let me back up a little bit. So one of the things that, we became very aware of is, and particularly growing up in Michigan, so after World War II, basically the rest of the world was destroyed. Japan was destroyed, Europe was destroyed, Russia was destroyed. So, one had to buy their goods and services from America in order to survive, whether it was an automobile or a washing machine or a refrigerator or what have you. I think during this period, we became sort of the manufacturers of the world and innovators of the world, for that matter. And I think through that, we built up a middle class, so we became really just, the largest middle class in the history of mankind. But all of our products and services became very mechanical. So as, if you're a traveling salesman and you travel across the country, in your Oldsmobile, you stayed at a Holiday Inn or Howard Johnson. And if you're a family vacation and you took the kids and you stayed in the Howard Johnson. It
became very standardized.
Very standard. And I think there was this sense of comfort of knowing that, okay, here's where I'm going to stay. So we kind of wiped out the sense of discovery in a sense. And the same thing happened with our food. We drive from Michigan to Ohio and we eat at McDonald's, and you go from Ohio to Indiana, you eat at another McDonald's or a Burger King for that. So but that was the whole premise of things, was you went to places that you knew. And so from a business standpoint, it was always, if you were just this sort of a badass local operator, you were kind of like, he's just a local guy, But if you were able to take your concept and roll it out, as we used to call it around the country, then you were a successful businessman. So I think the instrument of measure of success was, does it have legs?
Can it be franchised?
Yeah, can it be franchised?
Yeah.
If it couldn't, then, you were just, another local, And, I was always fascinated by that philosophy because there's, the fact of the matter is, I think one should go do a case study on this. Usually those amazing local operators have passion and love and create communities and neighborhoods. And interesting enough, as an example, where I was going to school in Brooklyn, we had, and by the way, back then, you can't do that these days because you get in trouble, but, you kind of like everybody's names and businesses was through their heritage. So it says Mike the Greek and Joe the Italian restaurant, So Mike the Greek was where we went for breakfast. And you know what? Mike the Greek's still there, in the corner of DeKalb. And Washington Avenue in Brooklyn. So interesting enough, everything that's happened in the world since the 70s, he's still there, and people, he's part of the community. So to me, I've always looked at that as, wow, that's got tremendous value, as opposed to a national chain where, if the demographics or sales are down, somebody in Chicago pushes a button and, closes the shop. So when we started the lab, all of this went into our philosophy. So we called it, by the way, the lab stands for Little American Businesses.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was, let's build a place that all of the small operators want to gather together.
Well, and you called it something from day one, right?
I call it the anti-mall because we needed to sort of enter the market with a hammer, you know. And so...
Which happens to be the name of the bar at the Packing House, right? Isn't it the Hammer?
That's the Hammer Bar, yeah.
Hammer Bar.
Yeah.
Circles within circles, yeah. Okay.
So I think the idea then was... Then we learned that, a lot of these folks, and this is this quiet revolution, I call it, that happened in the 90s, they didn't want to be in a mall. Like they and I knew that because even at Quicksilver and Gotcha, I could never go, we had the money to go open in one of the malls, and we have nice malls here.
Yeah.
But I think it would have, every time we opened a store in a mall, we lost more cool with the kids that were authentic and core. So I think it wasn't something we could afford to do. So this was a big deal. So I think cool operators were looking for places that were not in a mall. And I think in Orange County, if you're in a mall, you have to go to a strip center next to a 7-Eleven and a Happy Nail and a dog grooming shop.
Well, those were the malls. Those were the options. There were,
yeah.
I mean, I kind of laugh because, all the sort of the reaction to you in '94 by people that were not within the, that didn't get it, was, oh, this is just, this is not going to work. This is never going to fly. This is the model. This is not the model, and it's not going to fly. And I look back now. I remember I went out to Atlanta. I came back, and oh, look, they're all copying what they did, what Shaheen did at the lab. I mean, and I'm not taking away from anybody, but it's interesting. Like you look at the OC mix, you look at other places that are being developed, you look at malls that are being reactivated into a mixture of different things. They still can't get out of their own way in terms of the box component of it still, unless it's in those rare occasions, right? Because I think the added element to your lab in the camp is location. I mean, the location, they say location. You made that location and it became that location. Same thing happened across the street from the Packing House. I remember when those condos were going in, and then, Anaheim having the vision to basically activate a building that they had that was iconic right there on Anaheim Boulevard. I mean, when you and I think are cut from the same cloth, when I see something like that, and that's happening, I get really excited, right? Because there has a lot of soul. I mean, it's lasted since 1919, and it's still around, and now it has a new life, and you're seeing this generation of people where we're going to go a little bit longer, Paul, if we can. Okay, so these shows are about half an hour, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to be twice a month, but I really want to take this to the next level with Shaheen here because I think it's very important. What has happened is I remember being at coming out of design school. I was probably what was it 20 years ago, right? I remember going there and going, wow, this is really cool. And to me, and how we tie it with this luxury thing is, to me, that became a representation of my approach to luxury. Like me spending time there was a luxury. Spending time there and having a cup of coffee and chilling out, and nobody's basically trying to rush me out or taking the benches out of the mall for me to not sit on, kind of thing. I was able to hang there. I was able to stay there. It's a smart business thing. They tell you the longer you're on a website, the more you're going to buy. Well, the longer you're in a place that you enjoy, the more you're basically going to engage and spend, right? So there is a positive business aspect to it. But here I am at 53, and I got to tell you, my friend, my take on what is luxury was very heavily, and I had this conversation with another gentleman yesterday on the phone, was shaped by that experience at the lab in the camp, in part. By going to Metropolis, going to Shark Club, encountering, and we were talking about it a minute ago, shout out to Sam and the Hatch Design Group just up the street. There were people that were innovative even back then that were doing something that were in at least pockets of experimentation, discovery, right? Yeah. And here I am at 53, and I have more discretionary income that I can basically spend, but the roots of what I consider my DNA of luxury or quality living, let's put it that way, manifested itself in part very much by the time I spent over there.
Well, Rod, I think luxury it's kind of a fascinating word to me because I think in 90% of the cases, you think of shiny things,
What's luxury for you?
Gucci and, Fendi and Armani and, Ferragamo and so forth. I think there is actually a sort of an underlying revolution, call it, going on, and it's been going on for a while, and certain people in certain parts of the world, get this, and they're kind of knitting it together, but I feel like sooner or later it's going to surface up to more of a mainstream. But see, I think what maybe you're referring to in my compartmentalizing this is, to me it's called street luxury.
Okay.
And I think the best brand I can explain that's been doing this for a while and is very successful at it and should be a case study is Supreme.
Okay.
So Supreme is a great example of what a sort of the modern street luxury, because what's happened with a lot of the luxury brands, let's just say Gucci.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, when you look at the collections, I know the new collections just came out. I mean, it's just stuff is so over the top. And so it's either for, I call them airport brands, because you can land in any airport and you can see all these brands. So this feeling, or this feeling of discovery, or this feeling of, aspiration of wanting it because it's hard to get.
Curiosity addressed.
It's just,
yeah.
when you put that much of your product out there, I think it kills that. And, I'm sure these folks are really bright and they can figure all this out, and they have some sort of a plan. But I think at the end of the day, they have become very mass-oriented. Mm-hmm. And what's carried the baton for them now has been sort of the Chinese market and the Middle Eastern market, what I kind of refer to as new money.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this started in terms of quality.
Right.
And so I think, I'm not saying the quality is not necessarily there, but I think it's now become a little tchotchke,
It's become more volume.
I think it's become volume and tchotchke, so you're cool, really cool people don't walk around with brands on their T-shirts,
Right.
They just don't. And so, but I think when you look at this sort of next level of wealthy young people, whether they're celebrities or what have you, it definitely is more about that street luxury. And I think that philosophy, to me, also kind of triggers down to the restaurant business. So it's not about going to a place that spent $30 million on TI. It's very Las Vegas-y and very shiny. I'm not saying that's a bad experience, but it's not something that people necessarily crave. But people are more interested in ethnic food and localization and local food.
Authenticity.
Authenticity, yeah. I think that experience is always seems to be, rising. So I think if it was a battle of luxury dining or street dining, I think street dining wins.
Would you agree though? It's interesting because I have the same kind of conversation when I'm looking at doing design. I could not agree with you more. Okay, and I think you're either cut from that cloth or you're not. And I'm not negating the larger models or sort of the safe path models, if you will, but there is a certain amount of courage required if you're going to go down that path. If you're going to blaze your own path a little bit, and it's not uncalculated risk, if you will, but there's a certain amount of courage, right? I mean,
well, I think listen, all of this takes courage, of course. I'm not going to sort of cut short courage, but I think the problem that I see happens on and on, particularly within our industry, is everybody's an automatic. Everybody's building a project that takes 2 to 5 years. I mean, it takes me on the average 5 years now just to entitle. So, you call it 7 to 8 years before you get a project out. And by the time they start to finish, the world changes. And I think when they start, they're already looking in the rearview mirror or something. Oh, here's one of those projects. Let's go do one of those.
So imagine 5 years after.
And then by the time they put it out, you look at it and say, oh my gosh, this looks, And then you look at the millions of dollars, and there is talented people and very talented financial people that are financing these things as well. So, but I think nobody really takes the time to understand culture. What is it that people want, And so, we have this formula we developed back in '93. Actually, we call it the 4 C's. So every project for us has to have community. Mm-hmm. So if there's no community around that product, it's not worth for us to build it. Culture. It has to have some kind of a cultural connection. It's just, nobody needs more stuff, Commerce, which is, we want it to obviously do business, otherwise you're just a flaky artist, And then it has to have consciousness. You know, and because these days you can't just show up and build something. You know, you got to get people involved. Everybody wants to be a co-author. You know, and so I think a lot of projects that happen, they don't really think about. They're goofy because they don't think about those elements. So for me, you know, we look at culture and really how, you know, we live and how people. I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, if you're in Paris, like, I don't want to eat on Champs-Élysées in some big shiny restaurant. You know, I like to go into the Marais district, which is the old Jewish section,
Yeah.
and go into the alleys and find that amazing local, you know,
Yeah.
chef, somebody, you know, and to me that's the experience, you know, and I think that's happening everywhere, you know. So I think people, that's why speakeasies are so important now. People love that feeling of discovery. So,
Well,
it-
curiosity, discovery, right? I mean, sense of wonder.
and that's happening in fashion. I mean, it's just not exciting to go to the Gap. By the way, they make decent product and it's very well priced, but there's no romance. You know,
There's no love.
like why go into a Banana Republic? There's no connection. There's no experience. So I think, you know, people always talk to me about, oh my God, retail is dead and what's going on? What are you doing? I'm like, this is the most exciting retail period that I remember in my career, because every time, you know, I you know, Amazon took over all the big boxes, which they should have, because they were all mediocre. They were there's no great experience in walking into a department store. Like, I don't want to get sprayed by perfume and go take the elevator or escalator, go to the 5th floor just because I want to buy a pair of jeans. It doesn't make sense. It's not worth my time.
Right.
By the way, I got to walk through the whole freaking mall first, you know.
Right.
So I think I'd rather just go buy it on Amazon. So when it comes to anything that's commodity based, they're going to continue to grow. But what's happened, though, this has created an opportunity through the internet, by the way, that, you know, small talented artists, the craft people are coming out in America. We're knitting again. We're making food again. We're celebrating local stuff again.
Yep.
And so they can have a, you know, for very little money, they can have a shop online, and then they do a cool storefront somewhere, but they're not going to go open that cool storefront in a mall.
Right.
And so you know, we're finding it very exciting times right now, and they make really good product. Again, it to me, you know, it's a full circle. 25 years now.
Pride of craftsmanship.
It's little American businesses.
Yeah.
You know, that's where the innovation is coming. I also think the biggest thing that's going on in all of our businesses, again, whether you're in food or fashion or what have you, is localization. You know, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, it used to be that, you know, we went across our country and, you know, you ate at the same place, and
Right.
and that's completely changed. You know, if I go to Austin, I don't want to eat at Macaroni Grill.
Absolutely
you know,
not,
I'm going
right.
to go have Austin barbecue.
Yep.
You know, I mean, if I want to fly down there and go through the hassle. If I go to Portland, I'm not going to order Budweiser. I want
Right.
Portland brewed
Right.
beer. If I go to Chicago, I want to order a nice steak. You know, it's like if I go to Maine, I want lobster. You
Well,
know,
it's that community and culture you were talking about.
it goes back to that community and localization.
Uh-huh.
So we call it. It's really about localization and personalization and customization, and not homogenization.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I'm not going to mention what the property is, but there's a property, pretty nice property.
Oh, come on, you can tell me.
No, I'm not going to do it because their heart was. I will tell you off there. Okay. I'll even show you. Okay. But there are these properties that are iconic, that are great, and they have fallen victim to this sort of homogenized generalization approach in operation, minimizing cost, etc. Unfortunately, they reside. This particular property that I'm thinking of has a retail component, and they reside in an area that is rich with art. Now, you could argue that 20 years ago that area was really uniquely positioned when it came to artists, and now it's a little bit more standardized. I think you could picking up on what I'm talking about. But I walked into that store, and I saw a "Life is a Beach" sign that had a "Made in China" sign on the back of it. And you have artists that you trip over in that community. And I'm thinking to myself, why isn't there leveraged cross-branding with these artists? Trunk shows, you know, bringing people in, you know, like opening people's eyes to different things, using this as a platform for this to happen. Unfortunately, you know, that's the kind of world that we live in. So I have a question for you. It sounds to me, if I had to extrapolate, that the premise of your approach from the day that you opened the lab till today is pretty much the same. Would you say?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's the same.
Okay,
Yes.
the core of it.
Yeah.
So What has changed? Or when you say it's exciting, which I agree with you, it's an I mean, some people look at it as being, oh, retail is dying, and I'm looking at it as its opportunity to rethink, to reevaluate, to reinvent, right? It's an exciting time. What today do you see and you're excited about? I mean, you live in this. You got multiple projects. Before we close, I want to talk about your Long Beach project for a few minutes. But what do you see different today than, let's say, 93, 94?
Okay.
And what are you excited about?
This is a good one. Oh, I'm excited about a lot of things, but
I know.
I tell you what's changed. Everybody's cool. Everybody is cool. The entire freaking country is cool. You go to Minneapolis, it's cool. You go to Austin, it's cool. If you've been to Colorado, cool.
It's
And
not just New York, L.A.,
it's no longer,
Chicago.
New York and L.A. These places are cool. There's a music scene or this scene or that scene, and everything else is a flyby. And it's due to technology and the internet. So if you want to be cool, it's very easy to be cool. And I think through that you can also be more selective in terms of connecting to things that interest you or interest your lifestyle.
Okay.
Because everybody, by the way, is a brand today. That's what I hate social media. I'm not on anything, but that's what Instagram is. It's basically a platform so you can talk about yourself, which is and you're the brand.
You're
and
the
before,
brand,
the brand was the brand and you're the consumer. And today there's a blending of that going on. And I think this is the biggest thing that's happened in our lifetime. So when we're working on a project, we're not saying, oh, this is for these people and these are for these. Again, everybody's cool. So that's why I don't, I threw that instrument of measure for us. It used to be, demographics, Gen X and Gen Y. And, I jokingly say now for me it's gin and tonic now or something. But I think really all of that went out the window because it's really about culture, and culturally, we look at people that are into, organic foods. Well, that's a culture. Or people that are into healthy living. That's a culture. And I think you basically produce these products, but then you have to understand they're all cool, and I am sincerely mean that. When I travel, I don't think I've been to any city around the country and say, wow, these guys aren't even cool, As a matter of fact, the ones that don't even think they're cool.
Yeah.
Man, have you been to Nashville or these places are amazing. They got great food, they got great music, there's culture, there's lots to celebrate about. So I think that to me says, oh my, there's so many opportunities.
And you have to be authentic, right? Because those people are sophisticated enough to sniff you
They're
out.
picky.
Yeah.
Everybody's cool and they're picky. By the way, if they're not cool, they can just go Google it and they can
They can be cool.
They can be cool. So
No,
it's
but-
an easy access.
But, you are the brand of you. I mean, you said a minute ago, like, cool people don't wear brands. They do. They wear their own brand.
Well, they wear it their own way, or they don't necessarily.
They
have to
find their
plaster
own
it out.
voice.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
exactly,
They're
right?
They're not reliant on your T-shirt to say Calvin Klein on it, so that it's cool. But I mean, listen, some people do, but some people.
Some people. Well, not you, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about the Long Beach project. Because, again, following up on that question, we got a couple more minutes, but, following up with that question is, you did the lab, 93. Here we are working on the one that one of the things that you're working on is the Long Beach Exchange, I think, isn't it? Right? And so tell us about that project, how you dealing with that differently, maybe. Because
Well,
Long Beach is a cool city. I really like Long Beach for what they're trying to do, and a shout out to them for that.
Long Beach is a great place. Really like the current mayor. He's got great vision. He's
George,
young.
yeah, is awesome.
He gets it, and so there is a little philosophy behind all this. Okay. So and Long Beach is part of LA, but I'll use Orange County as the sort of the model. So in Orange County, we got 34 cities. Every city is looking to brand their own place now, and some have over time. Some have preserved their history, such as Circle of Orange done a great job, and those that haven't are looking to bring out their own brand. So I think that's an opportunity. So we're working in Garden Grove. We're looking to build a downtown for them. And Anaheim, we've done 10 projects now. So when Long Beach came along, we've learned that we have to take a large position to be able to really get the needle to move. So we've basically have closed on 52 lots. So it's a fairly large chunk of the neighborhood. And so that's going to enable us to really just make a presentation there, a cultural presentation. But it goes back to my philosophy of everybody's cool. So one of the things that's happened here in Southern California is our real estate prices have just gotten so expensive that, your average person just can't afford. And so they might live in these other areas just because not everybody can afford to live on the water at $5-10 million. That doesn't make them uncool. Everybody wants the same thing. Not only that everybody's cool, everybody wants the same thing. They want localization, they want safety, they want good education. So we've learned that in case of Anaheim, for instance, that building sat empty for 30 years. And so people just said, well, how are you going to get people here? And I always say, I want to build it for the locals. And if I can't get the guy across the street to come and have a cup of coffee at the packing house, I failed. And if I do really a good job locally, then other people want to come and experience the local thing, like we all do when we travel. Like, what's going on locally that I want to see, okay? I don't want to go to another regional mall, for instance. So then the idea of also is that we have such poor transportation in California. I think it has been affecting our culture, but I think now there is some conditions that I think we can't avoid. So one of the things that we learned in Anaheim, just because those people lived in Anaheim for whatever reason, maybe it's financial or maybe it's other reasons, they didn't necessarily like to get on the 5 and the 55 and the 7-3 and the 405 and the 5 to go to Newport to eat. And by the way, when you get there, where they're going to eat? At Billy's, on the beach. And, and you do that 10 times, you're done. So people really like doing things in their own neighborhood. Nobody wants to drive anymore. On the weekends, I want to do things within my, half a mile radius from my house. I don't want to get in my car and go to LA to eat, So the thing is, our mission in Long Beach is to bring in those goods and services and tap in deeply into the culture of what was there. And I am convinced everyone in these neighborhoods, if somebody just scratches, it's kind of like archaeology. So for instance, we learned that this is where Coltrane and some of these old jazz guys used to play and hang out. I mean, it's got a huge music culture, so the project we're going to call Beat, and really just tap into that culture. In Anaheim, for instance, we found out that, the Levi's family early on came from Germany, and they basically didn't have any, like a symphony there, so they brought all these musicians to San Francisco back then. They gave them a couple-year contract, and then when their contract was over, they got into their wagons and horses, and they came down and settled in Anaheim, and then they didn't know how, there was no music orchestra there, so they got into the beer business because they were Germans, and and we tapped into all of that. And again, I know you're deep into history, and so I love that. So you basically you drop into these neighborhoods, you dig out the history, you dust it off, and you bring it back. And it's just amazing to me that the locals really embrace it, particularly if you're not showing up with just another Starbucks and a Subway and a Happy Nail. I mean, this will be local product for
It's a
locals.
pride of place.
It's a pride of place.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to that street luxury thing that I was talking about.
No, I love that, Shaheen, and thank you for that term, because it really, I think, encompasses this. It is street luxury, and it's authentic, localized, pride of place luxury. So so a lot of people are into like placemaking. This is really place rediscovering, with, of course, the infrastructure to support that
really
journey,
is,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So I know we could talk longer. Paul is giving me the signal over there. You are welcome, my friend, anytime.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate you being here today. This was wonderful.
Terrific. Much luck to your show, and congratulations, you guys, for doing this.
Thank you. And before we go, give a shout out at least. Where do people find out about the lab? Where do people find out what you guys are doing? Do you have a website, anything you want to share?
Well, websites, obviously, but, again, we usually don't toot our stuff until... we're closer to the building.
No, but the stuff that you already have.
I mean, the stuff that we have is the lab on Bristol Street and the camp. They've been there for 17 and 25 years.
Right.
The Sebeka district, actually, we have about 14 acres within that area of really cool stuff. Randolph Street has got a few breweries in there and more to come. Anaheim, there's the Anaheim Packing House. There's the Farmers Park. There's 2 restaurants on there. One opened. It's called 18 Fold. The other is Cultivation. Very exciting stuff.
You got Center Street.
And then we have the Packard Building.
Oh, the Packard Building, yeah.
So which is Anaheim Brewery. And then we have the Make Building, which is distillery, Unsung Wine, beer. And there's a Palo Winery. We're under construction with Modern Times block down the street. It's called Leisure Town. So it's going to be a brewery plus a vegan Mexican restaurant and a swimming pool. So you can.
I do want to give another differentiator for you, because, and correct me if this is wrong, but my feeling is that when you get involved in, and I'll use the word because it's what applies, development of this, you also don't just develop to fill and flip. You actually are vested in the success of these spaces.
We have never sold a project in the history of our company. So we have 220 people about on our staff. So we have our own management company. We have in-house design. So these brands are babies for us. Again, in Anaheim, we have Center Street. There's lots of great stuff going on. I'm happy to announce, by the way, we're also involved on the press project here, the old LA Times building. So we're building this really interesting hall. I won't call it a food hall because I'm bored with that term, but I think it's the next generation of food. So we're deep into design on that. We closed on the Corona Mall, so we're looking to redo that because same philosophy. I think there's lots of cool people out in that part of the world.
What do you see yourself doing? Do you ever see yourself not doing this, not being involved in this? What happens? I mean, I know your kids are in college and you're sort of, you've been doing this for a long time. Is this such a part of your DNA that you will always have your finger in something, or do you ever see yourself not doing this?
For me, it's cool finding. I mean, I think this gives me all sorts of satisfaction. I can design furniture, I can design buildings, I can design food, and it gives me an opportunity to travel. I still travel like a madman, and drop into these nomad places, which is inspiration for me. So I don't really look at it as work, but I'm excited about my boys. I've got 3 amazing guys. One is in Boston University, second year, Dominic. The other is Nikolai. He's up at Berkeley. He's finishing his last year. And Sebastian graduated Berkeley with 2 degrees, and he's just moved down here. He's my roommate. So he works for PIMCO. So they're all in finance and real estate. So, at some point, I hope they come in and sort of carry the baton, while I go
Travel.
Get lost in Siberia or something.
Stay curious.
I already
buddy.
did Mongolia, so now I want to go see Siberia. So.
I think that's awesome. It's awesome. I come back anytime.
Thank
Seriously,
you.
Shaheen.
Thanks.
Really pleasure seeing you,
Thanks,
man.
you guys.
Don't make it so long next time.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. We will be back next week, actually, this month, with another episode of Selling the Luxe Life. And then we'll go to our regular programming of the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month at 9:30 for a half an hour. I know we ran long today, but man, not long enough. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on Selling the Luxe Life. We hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback via email on our social media platforms. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue discussing life's luxuries that inspire us while showcasing members of the Orange County community that share our same passion for sophisticated living.